7-year-old Ethan is in a vegetative state after a serious car accident that also killed his father. Sarah, the nurse who cares for him, finds herself on an emotional journey when she discovers that Ethan may have a special connection to the dream world. As Sarah delves deeper into Ethan's family history, she faces betrayals, secrets and challenges that could lead to his awakening. Along the way, a friendship blossoms into a deep bond with Ethan's mother, and an unexpected plot twist reveals that the true power of human connection can be more powerful than we imagine. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as Sarah made her way through the sterile corridors of the clinic, her footsteps echoing like a distant heartbeat in the otherwise quiet environment. The scent of antiseptic hung in the air, a constant reminder of the gravity of her work. She paused outside the door of room 203, her heart heavy with the weight of Ethan's situation. The 7-year-old boy lay motionless in the hospital bed, his small body covered with a thin white sheet, a stark contrast against the starkness of the room. Monitors beeped rhythmically, each sound marking the fragile thread of life that still clung to him. "Hey there, buddy," Sarah whispered, her voice barely above a hush as she stepped inside. She had taken care of Ethan since the day of the accident, and each day felt like a new chapter in a story that had been abruptly interrupted. "It's me, Sarah. Just checking in." She settled into the chair next to his bed, her routine providing a semblance of normalcy in the chaos of their lives. As she gazed at Ethan's serene face, memories flooded her mind. The car crash that had claimed his father's life and left Ethan in this vegetative state. She remembered the sirens wailing, the frantic rush to the hospital, and the look of despair on Michelle's face as she learned the extent of her son's injuries. "You're so strong, Ethan," she murmured, brushing a strand of hair away from his forehead. "I wish you could hear me." It was during one of these quiet moments that she first noticed a flicker of life in his expression. While she gently stroked his hand, she felt a slight twitch, a tiny but undeniable response. "Did you feel that?" she asked, her heart racing. "I think you did." The night rounds were always the most haunting. The clinic was quieter then, the shadows playing tricks on her mind as she moved from patient to patient. But tonight felt different. As she entered Ethan's room once more, she could have sworn she sensed a shift in the air, a crackling energy that made her skin tingle. "Maybe it's just wishful thinking," she muttered to herself, shaking her head as she settled into the familiar chair. "All right, let's see if we can wake you up a little," she said, her voice filled with determination. She took a deep breath and began to softly hum a tune, one of Ethan's favorites that she had learned from Michelle. It was a sweet melody that spoke of adventure and joy, a stark contrast to their reality. As the notes floated through the air, she felt a warmth spread from Ethan's hand, and to her astonishment, he turned his head slightly towards her, as if he could sense her presence. "Ethan, did you hear that?" she gasped, her heart racing. "You're here with me, aren't you?" The monitors beeped in response, and for a moment, Sarah felt a surge of hope. "You have to hold on, sweetheart. I know there's a spark in there, I can feel it," she urged, her voice trembling with emotion. Driven by her newfound conviction, Sarah spent the next few days researching cases of patients in vegetative states who had shown signs of awareness. Late nights in the clinic library became her solace, her determination fueled by the possibility that Ethan might still be reachable. She pored over studies and articles, her fingers tracing the words as she learned about the power of emotional stimuli in awakening consciousness. "Listen to this, Ethan," she said one afternoon, reading aloud from a journal article she had printed. "There have been instances where patients responded to familiar voices or music. It's like a key that unlocks a door in their minds." She looked at him earnestly, her heart filled with a mixture of hope and desperation. "I want to be that key for you, buddy." As she spoke, the machines continued their rhythmic beeping, a constant reminder of the fragile line between life and the void. Ethan's eyes remained closed, but deep inside, Sarah felt a connection, one that transcended the physical barriers surrounding them. She was determined to uncover the truth of his inner world, to discover whether the bond between them could break through the silence that had enveloped him. Sarah sat in the dimly lit room of the clinic, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor creating a backdrop of anxious anticipation. She watched Ethan, a 7-year-old boy trapped in a silent world, his small frame motionless beneath the crisp white sheets. The world outside continued, but here, time felt suspended, as if the very air was thick with unspoken words and lost moments. She often found herself lost in her thoughts, recalling the devastating car accident that had stolen not only Ethan's father but had also plunged Ethan into a vegetative state. The weight of that day hung heavily in her heart, and the sorrow etched on the faces of Ethan's mother, Michelle, during each visit only deepened her resolve to help them both. One afternoon, as Sarah was preparing to check Ethan's vitals, she heard the soft creak of the door. Michelle stepped inside, her eyes weary but determined. Sarah greeted her with a warm smile, hoping to provide some comfort. "Hey Michelle, how are you holding up today?" she asked gently, moving to make space for Michelle to sit beside Ethan. Michelle took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on her son. "I'm managing," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Some days are harder than others. She reached out, brushing Ethan's hair back from his forehead, a tender gesture that spoke volumes of her love and sorrow. Do you want to talk about it? Sarah offered, sensing the turmoil beneath Michelle's calm exterior. Michelle hesitated, her fingers lingering on Ethan's brow. He used to love music, she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. We would play his favorite songs in the car and he would sing along, trying to hit every note. It brought him so much joy. Tears welled in her eyes as she recalled happier times. Sometimes I wonder if he can still hear it, if he still remembers. Music is powerful, Sarah replied, her heart aching for the mother's pain. I've read that it can reach people in ways we can't fully understand. Maybe, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Maybe it could help him, somehow. Michelle's gaze shifted to Sarah, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. You think so? That it might bring him back to us? I believe it's worth trying, Sarah said encouragingly. We could create a playlist of his favorites. It might trigger something within him. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah and Michelle's friendship blossomed amidst the backdrop of their shared grief. They found solace in each other's company, bonding over their love for Ethan and their hopes for his recovery. Yet, as Sarah spent more time with Michelle, she began to notice an unspoken tension between the mother and son, a heaviness that lingered in the air. One evening, after a particularly emotional music session, Sarah broached the subject. Michelle, have you ever felt like there's something Ethan is trying to say? Sometimes I see a sadness in him, it's like he's holding on to something. Michelle's expression darkened, and she looked away, biting her lip. It's complicated, she murmured. There are things about our past that weigh heavily on us. Ethan loved his father, despite everything. But that love, it's intertwined with so much pain. Pain can manifest in ways we don't always see, Sarah said softly, her heart aching for the mother who was clearly struggling. Maybe confronting those feelings could help both of you heal. Michelle nodded slowly, lost in thought. I just wish I could take away his pain. I wish I could have shielded him from everything. Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Collins entered the room, his presence commanding yet comforting. Good evening, ladies, he greeted them with a warm smile. I was just thinking about Ethan's treatment plan. I've been reading some studies about the impact of music therapy on patients in a vegetative state. It might be the key to stimulating his responses. Music therapy? Michelle echoed, her eyes widening with interest. Do you really think that could help him? Dr. Collins nodded. Absolutely. There have been remarkable cases where patients have responded to familiar melodies. It can evoke memories, emotions, things that might help bridge the gap between his consciousness and the world. Sarah felt a surge of excitement. Then we should start right away. We can create a playlist of songs he loves and begin the sessions. Michelle's face lit up with renewed hope as she looked from Sarah to Dr. Collins. Let's do it. For Ethan. As they began to discuss the details, Sarah felt a sense of purpose wash over her. Together, they would explore this uncharted territory, hoping that the simple power of music could connect them all in ways they had yet to understand. As the soft notes of a familiar melody filled the dimly lit room, Sarah held her breath, a mix of hope and trepidation swirling in her chest. She had chosen a song that Ethan used to adore. His mother had told her how the rhythms and lyrics could light up his little face. Even now, as she sat beside his bed, she could almost picture him bouncing in his seat, clapping his hands to the beat. Okay, Ethan, she whispered, brushing a few stray strands of hair from his forehead. Let's see if you remember this one. She pressed play on the small speaker and let the music flow into the space between them. The room seemed to pulse with the sound, each note reverberating against the sterile walls of the clinic. At first there was nothing. Ethan lay as still as ever, the machines around him beeping in their rhythmic way, each sound a reminder of the life he had once lived. But then something shifted. As the chorus began, Sarah noticed a slight twitch at the corner of Ethan's mouth. It was so subtle, she almost convinced herself it was a trick of the light. But then it happened again, a tiny movement, almost imperceptible but undeniably there. Did you see that? Sarah gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. She turned quickly to the nurses' station, where a few staff members were chatting. Did you see how he reacted? One of the nurses, Claire, glanced at her. What do you mean? He's still... No, look. Sarah pointed excitedly at Ethan. He moved, just a little, but he did. Claire approached the bed, her expression shifting from skepticism to curiosity. They both leaned closer, the music continuing to play softly in the background. Suddenly, as if in response to their attention, Ethan's brow furrowed slightly, and the twitch at the corner of his mouth transformed into a more pronounced smile, a fleeting, almost ethereal expression. Ethan? Sarah's voice trembled with a mixture of hope and fear. Can you hear me? Can you feel the music? Ethan's eyelids fluttered, and for a moment, Sarah thought she saw a glimmer of awareness in those deep, unseeing eyes. This is incredible, she whispered, her heart racing. We need to tell Dr. Collins. The next day, Dr. Collins arrived with a portable monitor. So, I hear you've seen some interesting responses from Ethan? He asked, raising an eyebrow as he reviewed the logs of the past few days. Yes, it's the music, Sarah exclaimed, her voice bubbling with excitement. He reacted to the songs I played for him. I think it might be a breakthrough. Dr. Collins smiled, his eyes betraying a hint of skepticism but also a spark of intrigue. Let's see what we can do. We'll set up the equipment to track his brain activity during the sessions. If there's a connection, we'll find it. As the new equipment was set up, Sarah felt a rush of determination. She began to play music for Ethan every day, creating a routine that felt sacred. Each session was filled with anticipation, and with each passing day, she witnessed more subtle reactions. A slight lift of his finger, a flutter of his eyelids, even the faintest shift in his breathing. Do you remember this one? She asked one afternoon, playing a gentle lullaby that Michelle had mentioned Ethan loved. This is your favorite, isn't it? To her astonishment, Ethan's hand twitched again, this time more pronounced, as if he were trying to reach out to the sound. Sarah's heart soared. She had begun to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, Ethan was truly hearing her. But as days turned into weeks, the line between hope and doubt began to blur. In the quiet moments after each session, Sarah would often find herself questioning her own sanity. Was she really witnessing Ethan's responses, or was it just her mind playing tricks? One evening, as she sat in the dim light of his room, she couldn't help but voice her concerns to him. Ethan, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes I think I'm just imagining all of this. What if you're not really here with me? What if I'm just hoping too hard? In that moment of vulnerability, she felt a chill run down her spine, as if the air had shifted around her. But then, a series of soft beeps from the monitor drew her attention. She looked up, and her breath caught in her throat. Ethan's heart rate had quickened, a clear sign of his body responding to her voice. Ethan, can you hear me? She asked, a mixture of fear and hope flooding her heart. If you can show me, please. And then, astonishingly, Ethan's lips parted just slightly as if to respond. It was the first time she felt a true connection, a moment that transcended the silence, filled with the warmth of possibility. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a conduit, a bridge between two worlds, and for the first time in a long while, she believed in the power of music, dreams, and the undeniable bond that could awaken a soul. As Sarah rifled through the drawer of Michelle's desk, she stumbled upon a weathered journal bound in faded leather. The corners were frayed, and the pages yellowed with age. Her heart raced with a mix of curiosity and apprehension, knowing that this journal could hold the secrets of Ethan's past and the key to understanding the family that had become so intertwined with her life. She carefully opened it, and as she began to read, a flood of emotions washed over her. The journal revealed intimate details about Michelle's life and Ethan's early years, a childhood filled with laughter, music, and an overwhelming sense of joy that was marred by shadows from the past. There were entries about celebrations and milestones, but also heart-wrenching accounts of struggles and trauma. Michelle had written about the car accident in agonizing detail, painting a picture of the chaotic moments leading up to that fateful day. Sarah's heart sank as she read about the tension that had built between Michelle and Ethan's father, a relationship strained by unspoken resentments and unresolved conflicts. Why didn't you tell me about this? Sarah whispered to herself, her fingers tracing the words. She felt an overwhelming urge to confront Michelle, to understand the weight of the truths hidden within those pages. Later that evening, with the journal clutched tightly in her hands, Sarah met with Michelle in the hospital's small lounge, the sterile smell of antiseptic mingling with the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The air was thick with unspoken words as Sarah took a deep breath, bracing herself for the conversation ahead. Michelle, she began hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. I found your journal. Michelle's expression shifted, a flicker of fear darting across her features. You weren't supposed to read that, she replied, her tone defensive. I had to know, Sarah insisted, her heart racing. Ethan's condition, it's connected to all of this. You need to tell me the truth about what happened. Michelle's eyes welled with tears and she looked away, lost in her thoughts. I didn't want to burden you with our pain, she said softly, her voice trembling, but you deserve to know. Ethan, he was always so sensitive, so aware of the feelings around him. He sensed the tension between us. What do you mean? Sarah pressed, wanting to peel back the layers of Michelle's guarded heart. There was a fight that day, Michelle admitted, her voice breaking. Ethan's father and I, we were arguing. It was about everything, our failures, our past. I didn't even realize how angry we both were until it was too late. She paused to wipe the tears from her cheeks. Ethan was in the back seat and I can't help but wonder if he felt our pain, if he somehow sensed that something was going to happen. Sarah felt a pang of sorrow for both Michelle and Ethan. He's still in there, Michelle. I believe that, she said, trying to offer hope, but we need to face this together. The music, it might be our way to reach him. Michelle shook her head, the anguish evident in her eyes. I've been hiding from the truth for so long. I didn't want Ethan to know how broken we were. I wanted to protect him. Protecting him by keeping secrets? Sarah countered gently. You have to let go of the past to help him. I found joy in the music he loved because it reminded me of him, and I could sense his connection. But if you're holding back, you're only keeping him trapped. Michelle took a deep breath, her resolve crumbling. I just don't want to hurt him anymore. I don't want to be the reason he wakes up and feels that pain. Then let's do this together, Sarah urged, her heart swelling with empathy. You need to share your love for him, the joy you had as a family. We can face this together. I promise. Tears streamed down Michelle's face and she nodded slowly, the weight of her secrets beginning to lift. I want to help him, Sarah. I really do. I just don't know if I can bear the truth. You don't have to do it alone, Sarah reassured her, reaching out to hold Michelle's hand. Let's find a way to bring Ethan back. Together. In that moment, a flicker of hope ignited between them, the promise of healing beginning to take shape amidst the shadows of their shared past. Sarah stood in the softly lit room, surrounded by the gentle beeping of machines and the faint scent of antiseptic. She had organized a special music session for Ethan, determined to create an environment that felt familiar, almost like home. The other patients, some in their own worlds of silence, were seated around the room, their eyes flickering with curiosity as they waited for the music to begin. Sarah had brought along a small speaker, her heart racing with anticipation. Okay everyone, she said, her voice warm and inviting. Today we're going to listen to some beautiful music. This is for Ethan, and I believe it will bring him closer to us. She glanced at Ethan, who lay motionless in his bed, the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest a reminder of the battle he fought within. With a gentle press of a button, familiar tunes filled the room. The melodies were soft and soothing, songs Ethan had loved, lullabies that had cradled him to sleep in happier times. As the notes danced through the air, Sarah watched for any sign of response. She was determined to believe that Ethan could hear them, that he could feel the love pouring from everyone present. Minutes passed, and Sarah felt a twinge of doubt creeping in. Was she grasping at straws? Then suddenly she caught a flicker of movement from Ethan's fingers. Her heart raced. Did you see that? She whispered to the nurse beside her, who nodded in disbelief. As the music played on, something remarkable happened. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly, and his lips formed a faint smile. It was subtle, but it was there, a spark of recognition. Sarah felt tears well in her eyes. You're here with us, Ethan, she murmured, her voice trembling. We're not giving up on you. The session continued, and she encouraged the other patients to join in, clapping their hands to the rhythm and humming softly. The atmosphere shifted, filled with a sense of hope and togetherness. Michelle, Ethan's mother, entered the room, her eyes wide with curiosity. She had been hesitant at first, still grappling with her own grief and guilt, but Sarah's enthusiasm drew her in. Is he responding? Michelle asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded, unable to contain her excitement. I think he is. Look at his fingers. He's trying to reach out. The two women shared a moment of silent understanding, a bond deepening as they focused on the boy they both loved. As the music reached a crescendo, Michelle stepped closer to Ethan, her heart pounding. Ethan, honey, she said, her voice breaking. If you can hear me, squeeze my hand. There was a pause, a moment suspended in time, and then Ethan's fingers curled around hers. A gasp escaped Michelle's lips. Oh my God, he's awake, she cried, tears streaming down her face. The room erupted in a mix of disbelief and joy, and Sarah felt a wave of elation wash over her. In that moment of vulnerability, Michelle leaned closer, her face filled with a mix of fear and hope. Ethan, she whispered, there's something I need to tell you. Her voice trembled as she took a deep breath. There's a family secret, something that could change everything. I was afraid, but it's time you knew. The music faded into a gentle hum as the atmosphere shifted from joyous celebration to a tense anticipation. The other patients fell silent, sensing the weight of the moment. Sarah glanced between Ethan and Michelle, knowing that the road ahead was fraught with challenges. Yet, she also felt a profound connection forming, a promise to help heal not just Ethan but the deep-seated wounds within their family. Whatever it is, Sarah said, her voice steady, we'll face it together. Ethan needs us and we can't let him down. The room was filled with a palpable energy, a shared resolve to confront the past and fight for Ethan's future. The late afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of the clinic, casting warm patches of light across the room where Ethan lay. Sarah adjusted the music playing softly in the background, the familiar melodies enveloping the space like a comforting blanket. She glanced at Ethan, feeling a surge of hope mixed with concern. The bond she'd formed with him was unlike anything she had ever experienced, and each day brought new discoveries about his world. As she prepared for another session, Sarah noticed Michelle sitting in the corner, flipping through a stack of old photographs. Her expression was distant, eyes glossed over with memories that seemed to tug at her heart. Sarah approached gently, not wanting to intrude. Hey Michelle, she said softly, want to talk about it? Michelle looked up, her gaze finding Sarah's. These are from Ethan's birthday last year, she said, her voice tinged with sadness. He was so full of life. And now, her words trailed off, a deep sigh escaping her lips as she wiped away a tear. He's still in there, Sarah reassured her, a hand resting on Michelle's shoulder. We're going to reach him, I promise. Michelle smiled faintly, but the weight of unspoken words hung in the air. Sarah felt the tension that had lingered between them for days, a chasm of unacknowledged pain and secrets. Trying to bridge that gap, Sarah decided to dive deeper into the conversation. Have you thought more about the music sessions? she asked, her tone light yet probing. I really believe that it could help Ethan. I don't know, Sarah, Michelle replied, her voice wavering. I just feel like we're grasping at straws. What if it doesn't work? Then we find something else, Sarah said, her determination unwavering. But I've seen him respond. I feel like he hears us. Michelle's eyes flickered with uncertainty. You're so passionate about this. I wish I could believe as strongly as you do. Why don't you? Sarah pressed gently. What are you afraid of? Michelle hesitated, and Sarah could see the internal battle raging within her. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm afraid of what we might find out, or what we might not. Sarah leaned in closer, sensing the gravity of Michelle's words. You mean about Ethan? Or about your family? Both, Michelle replied, her voice cracking. There are things in our past that I just can't face. I buried them for a reason. Maybe it's time to unearth them, Sarah suggested, her heart racing at the thought of digging into the family's history. If we're going to help Ethan, we need to confront whatever it is that's haunting you. Michelle looked away, her expression a mixture of anger and fear. You don't understand, Sarah. Some truths can tear families apart. I can't let that happen. But is keeping it a secret helping anyone? Sarah countered, her frustration bubbling to the surface. Ethan deserves the truth, and so do you. The silence that followed was thick with unresolved tension. Finally, Michelle's voice broke through, heavy with emotion. You think it's easy for me? You think I haven't tried? I just want to protect him and myself. From what? Sarah pressed, her heart aching for both women caught in a web of pain and fear. From the past, Michelle whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. From the truth about the accident. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. What happened, Michelle? I need to know. Just then, a new patient was wheeled into the room, breaking the moment and forcing them to pause. Sarah looked at Ethan, then back at Michelle, sensing the urgency of their conversation almost slipping away. As the nurse began to settle the new patient, Sarah felt a fire ignite within her. She needed to uncover the truth, not just for Ethan but for Michelle too. We can't keep avoiding this, she said firmly. I'm here for you, but you need to let me in. Michelle wiped her tears and nodded, her expression shifting. Okay, I'll think about it, but I need time. Of course, Sarah replied, offering a reassuring smile. Just know that I care about you both and I want to help. As the music filled the background once again, Sarah felt the weight of the unspoken truth lingering in the air, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. She was determined to dig deeper, to face whatever shadows loomed over them, believing that only then could they truly reach Ethan. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting an orange hue over the clinic, Sarah found herself pacing outside Michelle's room, her heart racing with trepidation. The discovery she had made about the car accident gnawed at her mind, each thought a jagged piece of glass cutting deeper into her resolve. It was time to confront Michelle. Taking a deep breath, Sarah pushed the door open, stepping into the dimly lit room. Michelle sat on the edge of Ethan's bed, her fingers intertwined as she absent-mindedly stroked Ethan's hair. The air was thick with unspoken words, and Sarah could sense the weight of secrets hanging between them like a heavy fog. Michelle, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the turmoil within her. We need to talk. Michelle looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and weary. About what, Sarah? Is it about the music sessions? I thought we were making progress. It's about the accident, Sarah said, her tone firm. I found something that changes everything. A flicker of fear crossed Michelle's face, but she quickly masked it with a defensive demeanor. What do you mean? What did you find? Your journal, Sarah replied, crossing her arms as she leaned against the wall. You wrote about the fight you had with Ethan's father before the accident. It wasn't just an accident, was it? Michelle's expression hardened, and she stood abruptly, her hands clenched into fists. How dare you go through my things? You have no right. I have every right, Sarah retorted, her voice rising with emotion. Ethan's life is at stake here. If there's something you're hiding, if there's more to this story, he needs to know. Ethan is in a coma. He can't know anything. Michelle shot back, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. You don't understand what it's like to lose someone like this, to feel that weight of guilt and blame. Then help me understand, Sarah implored, stepping closer, her eyes pleading. You can't keep this from him forever. He deserves to know the truth, and so do you. Tears streamed down Michelle's cheeks as she collapsed back onto the bed, her composure shattered. It was a fight, Sarah. A stupid, reckless fight. We were arguing about everything, money, our future, Ethan. It got out of control and I was so angry. I never thought it would end like this. Tell me what happened, Sarah urged, sitting beside her, the tension between them shifting as compassion seeped into the room. You need to let this go. It's eating you alive. Michelle took a deep breath, her shoulders shaking. We were driving home from a party. I wanted to leave early, but he insisted on staying longer. I was frustrated and we were shouting at each other. I took my eyes off the road for just a moment. That's all it took. And then, Sarah pressed gently. He swerved to avoid something. Maybe it was just a shadow, I don't know. I just remember the sound of the crash, the glass shattering, and then silence. Michelle's voice broke and she buried her face in her hands. I never wanted this. I just wanted to be heard. I wanted him to listen to me. Sarah's heart ached for Michelle, realizing the depth of her pain. You have to tell Ethan. He deserves to know that you loved him, that you would have done anything to protect him. No matter what happened, you're still his mother. Michelle looked up, her eyes filled with sorrow. What if he can't forgive me? What if he wakes up and all he feels is anger? I can't bear that on my conscience. Every family has its secrets, but the truth can also bring healing, Sarah said softly, placing a hand on Michelle's shoulder. You both need to face this together. It's the only way to move forward. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of their shared grief and unspoken fears. Finally, Michelle nodded, her resolve hardening. You're right. For Ethan's sake, I need to tell him the truth. I need to face it. As Sarah watched Michelle gather her strength, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. The road ahead would be challenging, but perhaps together they could find a way to heal, not just for Ethan, but for themselves. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dimly lit hospital room, Sarah adjusted the soft lighting to create a calming atmosphere. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for another session with Ethan. The rhythmic beeping of the machines provided a steady backdrop, a reminder of the fragile connection between life and the void that encased him. She placed her hands gently on Ethan's, feeling the warmth of his skin and hoping it would bridge the gap between their worlds. Okay, Ethan, she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. Today we're going to try something different. I've got a new idea. She glanced at the small Bluetooth speaker on the table, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Music and dreams. I think they might just hold the key. With deliberate movements, Sarah connected her phone to the speaker and selected a playlist filled with the songs Ethan used to love. With the first notes of a familiar melody, the room seemed to transform. The gentle strumming of a guitar filled the air, weaving through the silence like a thread of hope. Sarah watched Ethan intently, searching for any sign of recognition or response. At first, nothing happened. The seconds stretched into minutes, and doubt began to creep into her mind. What if this was all in vain? Just as she was about to reach for the stop button, she noticed a slight twitch in Ethan's fingers. Did you feel that? She exclaimed softly, her eyes widening in disbelief. Ethan, can you hear me? Her heart raced. The music continued to play, and she leaned closer, her voice trembling with anticipation. If you can hear me, show me a sign. To her astonishment, Ethan's fingers twitched again, this time more deliberately. Sarah felt a rush of exhilaration. Yes, that's it. Just like that, she encouraged, her voice steadying. She continued to play the music, shifting to another song, one that had a more upbeat tempo. As the notes danced in the air, she could see Ethan's brow furrow slightly, as if he were straining to wake from a deep slumber. Ethan, you're doing so well, she said, her voice a blend of excitement and disbelief. Keep going, I know you can hear me. The music shifted to a soft ballad, and Ethan's breathing changed, becoming deeper and more rhythmic. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. In that moment, she felt an unexplainable connection to him, as if she were stepping into a dream of his own. Then, in a surreal twist, she began to feel a warmth enveloping her, an echo of something she couldn't quite understand. Suddenly, the world faded away, and Sarah found herself standing in a lush, vibrant meadow, the sun shining brightly above her. Ethan? She called out, her voice echoing softly. Are you here? To her astonishment, a figure appeared in the distance. It was Ethan, a younger version of himself, running freely across the field, laughter bubbling from his lips. His eyes sparkled with joy, untouched by the tragedy that had befallen him. Sarah, he called, his voice ringing with innocence and mirth. Come play with me. I'm here, Ethan, she shouted, her heart swelling with a mixture of love and longing. I've missed you so much. As she ran towards him, she suddenly felt a pull, a tether connecting them. In this dreamlike state, she could sense his thoughts, his feelings, all the music that had filled his life before the accident. Can you hear the music? She asked breathlessly. Yes, he replied, dancing in circles, his laughter mingling with the melody of the song that still played in the background. It makes me feel alive. Good. Just keep holding on to that feeling, Sarah urged, extending her hand toward him. We'll find our way back together. Then just as quickly as the dream began, everything started to fade. The colors of the meadow dulled, and Ethan's laughter echoed away into silence. Sarah felt herself being pulled back, and with a jolt, she opened her eyes, finding herself back in the hospital room, her hands still resting on Ethan's. The music had stopped, and for a moment, she sat in stunned silence. Had it been a dream, a figment of her imagination? But then she saw it, a single tear rolling down Ethan's cheek, a sign of the profound connection they had just shared. Ethan, can you hear me? She asked again, her voice shaking with emotion. Can we do that again, please? At that moment, she knew they were on the brink of something incredible. The music, the dreams, and the bond they shared could be the key to awakening him, and she was determined to explore every possibility. The atmosphere in the clinic was charged with a mix of hope and anxiety as Sarah worked tirelessly with Ethan. After weeks of music therapy, the medical team had begun to notice subtle improvements in his condition. The room was filled with a soft glow from the morning sun filtering through the blinds, casting gentle patterns on the sterile sterile walls. Sarah stood by Ethan's bedside, her heart racing as she observed his increasingly responsive movements during their sessions. "Look, Dr. Collins," Sarah called, her eyes sparkling with excitement as she pointed to the monitor. "His brain activity is spiking again during the music. I think we're really getting through to him." Dr. Collins, a seasoned neurologist with a keen eye for detail, approached the bedside. He reviewed the readings, a furrow forming on his brow. "This is promising, Sarah. We need to document every reaction. If we can establish a consistent pattern, we might be onto something groundbreaking." As they spoke, a reporter from a local news station entered, her notepad in hand. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Sarah," she said, her voice bright but laced with urgency. "I heard about Ethan's case and wanted to get a story. There's been a lot of interest in the community." Sure," Sarah replied, feeling a mix of apprehension and curiosity, "but I'm not sure how much I can share. This is a sensitive situation." "Of course I understand," the reporter said with a nod, her pen poised over the notepad. "But the public wants to know how music therapy is helping. Can you tell me about the techniques you're using?" Just as Sarah was about to respond, her phone buzzed with a message from Michelle. She hesitated, glancing at the screen and then back at the reporter. "Can we talk later? I need to." The reporter's eyes narrowed slightly. "Is everything okay? You look a bit shaken." "I'm fine," Sarah insisted, forcing a smile. "Just a lot of emotions tied up in this." She quickly excused herself, stepping out of the room to read Michelle's text. It was a request to meet after her shift. A knot tightened in her stomach. The tension between them had been palpable since their last confrontation. When Sarah returned to the room, Dr. Collins was still speaking with the reporter. "And we believe that the combination of music and emotional connection can lead to significant breakthroughs," he explained, showcasing his enthusiasm for the potential of their work. Sarah couldn't help but feel a twinge of pride. "We're just scratching the surface," she added, her voice steady but her mind drifting to the unresolved issues with Michelle. "There's so much more to explore." The reporter, sensing the shift in the conversation, pressed on. "I've also heard some troubling details about Ethan's mother. Is it true that there are secrets that could affect his recovery?" The question hung in the air, and Sarah felt a wave of protectiveness wash over her. "I can't comment on Michelle's personal life. What matters is Ethan's progress and our commitment to helping him." "Of course," the reporter replied, though her eyes sparkled with intrigue. "But if there are undercurrents affecting his treatment, wouldn't it be in everyone's best interest to address them?" With a tight smile, Sarah excused herself again, this time needing to stretch her legs and clear her head. She paced the hallway, the weight of the reporter's words heavy on her shoulders. What if the secrets surrounding Michelle truly did impact Ethan? The thought gnawed at her as she replayed their last conversation. Later that day, Sarah and Michelle met in the hospital's quiet cafeteria, the sterile smell of antiseptic replaced by the faint aroma of coffee. Michelle sat at a table, her expression a mixture of anxiety and hope. "Sarah," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I wanted to talk about what the reporter said. You know I've been trying to protect Ethan from everything." "I know," Sarah replied, her tone softening, "but we can't ignore the past. There are things that need to be confronted for Ethan's sake." Michelle's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was doing the right thing, keeping him safe. I never wanted him to carry the weight of my mistakes." "Then let's face them together," Sarah urged gently. "We need to be transparent. It's the only way we can truly help him." Michelle nodded, but a flicker of fear crossed her face. What if the truth is more damaging than the lies? "Sometimes the truth can be painful, but it's also liberating," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "We owe it to him to be honest. He deserves to know everything." As the two women sat in silence, the emotions between them shifted. Sarah felt the gravity of their situation, understanding that the path ahead was fraught with challenges. But she also realized that healing couldn't happen in the shadows. Together, they would have to navigate the complexities of their shared past, and whether Michelle was ready or not, the truth would eventually come to light. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the hospital buzzed with a palpable sense of anticipation. Sarah stood at the entrance of the makeshift stage in the clinic's common area, her heart racing. She had worked tirelessly to organize the musical event, hoping it would not only provide joy to the patients but also spark something deep within Ethan. The room was filled with the gentle hum of conversations, laughter, and the soft strumming of guitars as family members and friends gathered, their faces glowing with hope and trepidation. "Do you think he'll really respond?" Michelle asked, her voice a mixture of anxiety and hope as she stood beside Sarah, clutching her hands tightly. "I believe he will," Sarah replied confidently, though doubt flickered in her mind. Music has a way of reaching places that words can't. She glanced at the empty bed in the corner where Ethan lay, still and unresponsive, yet she could almost feel the connection pulsing between them, stronger than ever. As the first notes of a familiar song filled the air, the audience settled into an expectant silence. Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on Ethan's still form. The band began to play a melody that Ethan loved, a song his mother had shared with her, the one that had always brought a smile to his face. She closed her eyes briefly, imagining him dancing, laughing, and feeling alive. "Come on, Ethan," she whispered under her breath, her heart aching for him. "We're here for you." Halfway through the performance, something extraordinary happened. The music swelled, and Sarah noticed a flicker of movement. Ethan's fingers twitched. A murmur spread through the crowd, and Michelle gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Ethan," she cried, her voice breaking. The band continued, their energy surging as they played with newfound purpose. Sarah leaned closer to Ethan, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "Ethan, if you can hear us, show us you're with us. Just a little more." Then, as if responding to her plea, Ethan's eyelids fluttered, and his hand began to move rhythmically to the beat. Gasps echoed in the room, excitement building like a wave. "He's responding," someone shouted. "Keep playing," Sarah urged the band, her heart racing. With every note, Ethan's movements grew more pronounced. Suddenly he opened his eyes. The room fell silent, but his gaze was unfocused, as if he were still lost in a dream. "Ethan," Michelle cried, rushing to his side. "Can you hear me?" A strained expression crossed Ethan's face, as if he were wrestling with something deep within. "Mom?" he whispered, his voice hoarse and fragile. "Yes, I'm here, sweetheart." Michelle's voice cracked with emotion, and she reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "You're safe. We're all here for you." But then, something shifted in Ethan's expression. "I remember," he murmured, his brow furrowing in confusion. The audience leaned in closer, breaths held in anticipation. "What do you remember, Ethan?" Sarah asked, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "Please tell us." He blinked slowly, and as if struggling against a tide of memories, he finally spoke. "The accident. I saw it before it happened." A collective gasp swept through the room. "What do you mean?" Michelle asked, her voice barely above a whisper, fear creeping into her words. "There was a fight, you and Dad," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "You were both so angry." And then, his eyes widened, a mixture of fear and clarity washing over him. "Someone else was there too. Someone I didn't know." The atmosphere in the room shifted, tension thickening the air. Sarah exchanged a glance with Michelle, who looked both terrified and heartbroken. "What do you mean, Ethan?" Sarah pressed gently, feeling the weight of the moment. "I thought it was just a dream, but it felt so real," Ethan continued, his gaze drifting as if he were gazing into the past. "I saw betrayal, something hidden, someone I loved was involved." A stunned silence enveloped the room, broken only by Michelle's soft sobs. "Ethan, sweetheart, it's okay. You're safe now. We can figure this out together," she said, desperately seeking to comfort her son while grappling with the implications of his revelation. Ethan closed his eyes again as if retreating into himself. "I need to tell you, to help you understand. It's not what you think," he whispered, and the room held its breath, the weight of the truth hanging in the air, poised to unravel the secrets that had bound them all in pain.